It does seem like the media have got the throw her under the bus green light, though, when we're posting things like this. We're slagging her off behind the scenes, we're dropping all the information, and then reminding you of, her attacking the majority of the population of America when she posted F the Orange Man.
Rachel Zegler arrived at Disney's Burbank headquarters under tight security. No press, no publicist. Just her and a small team of attorneys walking into one of the most high-stakes meetings of her career. She wasn't greeted by executives or handlers, only a silent escort who led her to a private conference room already occupied by a table full of Disney's top legal minds. The air inside was ice cold. No one smiled. There were no casual pleasantries. On the table sat thick binders filled with printed contracts, legal notes, and color-coded transcripts of her now infamous interviews. Every word she had spoken publicly over the past 6 months had been documented, time-stamped, and matched directly against her contractual obligations. Disney's lead attorney wasted no time. Zegler, they said, had violated multiple sections of her agreement with the company, most notably the clauses concerning public conduct, brand alignment, and moral responsibility. They read directly from the fine print. The performer shall refrain from making any statements in public or private that may bring harm, ridicule, or reputational damage to the studio, its properties, or affiliates. According to Disney, her interviews had done exactly that. They cited her viral remarks calling the original 1937 Snow White weird, her dismissal of the prince as a stalker, and her repeated comments about how outdated the story was.
You know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird.
These weren't isolated moments. They were a pattern. A pattern the studio claimed caused measurable harm. In another binder, lawyers presented data, social media backlash timelines, negative sentiment graphs, and early box office projections that nosedived following her press appearances. One report showed that fan engagement dropped by nearly 40% after Zegler's Comic-Con interview went viral. Screenshots of trending hashtags like #NotMySnowWhite and #BoycottDisney were highlighted in red. The lawyers made it clear this wasn't just a PR problem, it was a financial disaster, with the movie's production costs ballooning between $240 and $270 million, and early estimates showing a global return of less than $90 million. The studio was hemorrhaging money. Executives blamed her interviews for accelerating the collapse. Zegler's lawyers didn't flinch. They were prepared. They brought their own stack of documents, emails between her team and Disney's marketing department, internal talking points sent from studio publicists, and draft interview scripts that matched the very quotes now being used against her.
You're crying on that stage.
When am I not crying in public? It's so upsetting.
Why were you crying?
Oh my gosh, I saw we didn't even see, but I saw the logo and I went, that's my name, Snow White's up there.
One internal email from a senior marketing executive encouraged Zegler to embrace the film's modern twist and to speak honestly about how the character represents a shift from outdated narratives. Another draft sent to her team explicitly suggested she, highlight Snow White's independence and acknowledge how the original version hasn't aged well. These weren't off-script moments, her lawyers argued. These were guided comments, approved, encouraged, and often written by Disney's own team. But the tone in the room never softened. Disney wasn't just there to talk. They were setting the stage for legal retaliation. They made it clear that the company was reviewing its options, which could include financial penalties, damage claims, or even public disassociation. Every word spoken felt like a warning shot. Zegler sat silent through most of it, expression unreadable. She had gone from being the face of a legacy princess reboot to the possible scapegoat for a $100 million disaster. And now, with both legal teams fully armed, this meeting wasn't about finding middle ground. It was about preparing for war. The fallout from Snow White wasn't just bad, it was catastrophic.
You see yourself as the evil queen. You are not evil. You are not evil. You're a queen, but you're not evil. What was it like seeing yourself as the evil queen for the first time?
We did not see the clip.
With a production budget soaring between $240 and $270 million, Disney expected a global hit. Instead, the numbers tanked. Opening weekend returns were devastating, and by the end of its theatrical run, the film had barely cleared $90 million worldwide. That wasn't just a disappointment, It was a bomb. Executives watched as weeks of advanced metrics, test screenings, and audience anticipation collapsed in real time. The panic set in quickly. Box office trackers showed audiences weren't just uninterested, they were actively turned off. And everywhere Disney looked, Rachel Zegler's face was front and center. Her voice echoed through countless interviews, clips, and press junkets. The damage wasn't hidden, it was recorded, shared, and weaponized by critics and fans alike. Clips of Zegler calling the original film creepy flooded social media platforms. In one particularly viral video, she laughed off the idea of Snow White needing a prince, insisting her version of the character wouldn't dream of waiting for a man to save her. The reactions were swift and brutal. Hardcore Disney fans, many of them multi-generational viewers, felt insulted, not just by the remake, but by the attitude. Hashtags like #FireZegler, #NotMySnowWhite, and #BoycottDisney started trending globally.
This is one of the one days of the year, this and SantaCon, that I don't go out.
Oh, because you're scared? Oh.
Well, it gets very rowdy. I live in an area with a lot of bars and restaurants.
Fan-made edits flooded TikTok, comparing the original Snow White's grace and innocence to Zegler's sarcastic tone and dismissive language. For Disney, a company whose brand is built on nostalgia and multi-generational loyalty, this was a code red. Behind the scenes, the numbers told an even darker story. Internal analytics teams tracked steep declines in merchandise sales, particularly Snow White-themed toys and apparel. Retail partners reported that promotional displays were being pulled due to low interest. Theme park surveys showed decreased engagement with Snow White attractions. Even streaming numbers for the 1937 animated classic began dropping after Zegler's comments resurfaced. The backlash wasn't just vocal, it was financial. Disney was watching the ripple effect spread across every branch of its empire. In the legal meeting, executives presented these numbers like a prosecutor building a case. Zegler's interviews, they said, didn't just reflect poorly on her, they directly harmed the brand.
This thing was a disaster. It only made $43 million at the box office, which is really bad for a movie like this. I don't have the numbers at the top of my head, but I want to tell you, Cinderella, which was a number of years ago, don't forget how much inflation has happened.
She hadn't just alienated casual viewers, she had driven away Disney's most loyal base. Older fans felt mocked, while younger audiences weren't buying into the reboot. Even promotional campaigns had to be revised midstream. Marketing teams were forced to pull several clips from circulation because they featured Zegler making controversial statements. Ad budgets were slashed, trailers were re-edited, and every adjustment came with a cost, both in dollars and in damage control. To Disney, the equation was simple. Zegler's behavior equaled public backlash. Public backlash equaled financial collapse. And the box office numbers were the smoking gun. The studio had poured nearly $250 million into a movie that was now being seen as a cultural misstep. And whether Zegler intended it or not, her comments had helped burn it down. The message from Disney's legal team was loud and clear. This wasn't about hurt feelings. It was about cold, hard losses. And someone would be held accountable. What happened next took the entire situation from damage control to open warfare. As Disney's legal team pushed the narrative that Rachel Zegler had acted recklessly, her attorneys began countering with hard proof that flipped the script entirely. They didn't just deny the allegations. They brought receipts. Email chains, internal memos, call transcripts, and media briefings all pointed to a stunning truth. Much of what Zegler had said publicly had been either directly approved by Disney's own marketing department or strongly encouraged as part of their strategy to modernize the brand.
Just last week, the media and the shill influencers were trying to do everything they could to save Snow White from being a complete and total flop in the box office, and they failed miserably. This movie is already a complete and total disaster, and it is so bad that now even the media has to admit.
One internal email, dated months before the press tour began, instructed Zegler's PR rep to lean into the character's feminist reimagining and position Snow White as a symbol of empowerment for a modern generation. Another briefing document included talking points that told Zegler to describe the prince's role as non-essential and emphasized that her version of Snow White would be leading with courage, not waiting for a man. These weren't offhand remarks she made on her own. These were bullet points sent directly from Disney corporate. One call transcript, logged and timestamped by her team, showed a senior Disney marketing executive verbally directing Zegler to be bold in interviews and challenge outdated narratives. Zegler's attorneys laid this evidence out in front of the studio's legal team like a bomb. If Disney wanted to argue breach of contract, they would have to explain why their own internal materials contradicted their claims. Every quote Disney tried to use against her had a corresponding internal directive backing it up. Her legal team argued that not only had she fulfilled her contractual obligations, she had followed orders to the letter. If anything, she had been used as a mouthpiece for a campaign Disney no longer had the courage to stand behind once the public turned on it. Behind closed doors, the mood shifted. The studio's hardline stance began to crack.
Snow White reviews are in. Snow White, how shall we say? Data points are in, because we now know that it was a flop.
If the documents Zegler's team possessed were ever leaked, or worse, presented in court, Disney could be exposed as having created the very controversy it was now trying to escape. Not only would they face a public relations catastrophe, but it could open the door for breach of contract claims from Zegler herself. Her team began exploring countersuit options, including reputational damage, emotional distress, and even defamation should Disney continue to imply she had acted independently and recklessly. And the stakes weren't just financial. The media was already circling, and a leak of those internal documents would set off a firestorm. Headlines wouldn't read Zegler sabotages Snow White. They'd say Disney set her up. Disney's carefully guarded reputation as a family-friendly studio would take a brutal hit, especially if the public believed they had scapegoated a young actress to save face for a failed film. It would look like corporate betrayal, pure and simple. Worse, it would show that Disney was willing to throw one of its own stars under the bus, rather than admit its creative strategy had backfired. By the end of the meeting, no agreement had been reached. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about contracts anymore. It was about truth, reputation, and control. Zegler's team had turned the tables.
Snow White, the toe-curlingly terrible live-action remake, has bombed so hard at the box office that even Paul Tassi had to admit it. It got $43 million, and there are very few ways to spin that.
And if this exploded into court, or the press, Disney stood to lose far more than money. They stood to lose trust. As tensions mounted behind the scenes, the fallout began rippling across Disney's entire empire. What started as a failed film release had now become a full-blown identity crisis for one of the world's most powerful entertainment companies. Snow White was supposed to be a flagship project, another crown jewel in Disney's long legacy of live-action remakes. Instead, it became a case study in how fast a brand can unravel when its audience feels betrayed. And it wasn't just the fans turning away. Investors were now watching with alarm, demanding answers, and calling out the company's leadership for straying too far from its roots. Shareholder meetings grew tense. In quarterly earnings calls, executives were grilled not just about declining profits, but about the company's entire creative direction. Questions weren't just about box office losses, they were about strategy. Why had Disney allowed one of its most iconic characters to be rebranded so aggressively? Why was the tone of the promotion so dismissive of the original film's values? Why had the studio taken such a massive risk with a property beloved across generations? Longtime stakeholders worried aloud that Disney had lost its core identity, trading timeless magic for politics and modern messaging that alienated loyal families. The backlash wasn't limited to financial reports. Theme parks, especially Disneyland and Disney World, felt the blow as well. Merchandise tied to the film sat untouched on shelves. Even in high-traffic gift shops, racks of Snow White dolls featuring Zegler's likeness were left unsold.
Oh my god, well, when you get to wear Sandy Powell, first of all, insane. And then you get to be lit by Mandy Walker, and Nadia Stacey designed your hair and makeup. It's like the most incredible thing in the world. And then all of a sudden you open your eyes and you watch the playback, which I never do.
With cast members instructed to quietly remove or relocate them. Social media feeds showed photos of Disney stores with clearance bins overflowing with promotional products. Meanwhile, legacy Snow White items, classic versions featuring the 1937 design, saw a sudden spike in resale demand as fans scrambled to hold on to the real Disney before it changed forever. Internally, morale was spiraling. Disney's own creative teams, writers, animators, marketing execs, were split over how things had gone so wrong. Some argued that the failure rested entirely with the promotional strategy, and that Zegler had simply become the face of a bigger misstep. Others pointed to the corporate-level push for aggressive rebranding, where character tradition was seen as outdated, and storytelling was stripped of its romantic core to chase modern approval. Leaked messages from inside the company revealed heated debates between marketing divisions and creative leads, each blaming the other for pushing the film in the wrong direction. And through it all, Rachel Zegler remained in the eye of the storm. Her name became a symbol, not just of a miscast role or a controversial interview, but of a cultural divide Disney had walked straight into. On one side were younger audiences who applauded her for speaking freely and modernizing a dated character. On the other side were millions of families who had grown up on classic Disney and now felt like the company had turned its back on them. Zegler wasn't just an actress anymore. She was a lightning rod, charged by a corporate machine that had built her up, then tried to walk away the moment it all went south. By the time legal teams wrapped the emergency meeting, it was clear that this was no longer a battle over a film. It was a war for the soul of Disney. The studio's legacy, its public trust, and its financial future were all now tied to a single catastrophic release. And every step moving forward would be watched, judged, and dissected by a global audience waiting to see whether Disney could recover, or if this was the moment the magic finally broke.